Disgusting workers such as yourself do not deserve to be successful. I received the SMS message on my phone as Philippe Chatrier was serving for the championship on the court where Rafael Nadal was competing. I introduced myself as Jacob Harrison. While I was sitting courtside at the French Open final in Paris, I received a text message informing me that I had just been terminated from my position. I am 38 years old. My supervisor at Gravura Group, a technology consulting firm based in Chicago, where I had worked as senior strategic director for a period of 6 years, Riley Denton was the one who sent me the message. For a period of 6 years, our European division was able to maintain a viable business by cultivating connections, acquiring clients, and producing revenue. Over the course of 6 years, I took calls with executives in London and Frankfurt, which caused me to miss family dinners. A firm that had just thrown me away like a used napkin, despite my 6 years of commitment to the company. Perhaps 10 seconds passed as I was fixated on the screen. Nadal's victory in the point caused the audience behind me to erupt in cheers, yet the atmosphere was subdued. It was immediately after that when the second text emerged. It's over for you. Bring your desk to a clean state by Monday. No phone contact, no meeting, and no explanation were provided. Putting an end to someone's career while they were on a trip that they had worked hard for and should have been a reward is nothing more than a cowardly act. I had earned this trip to Paris by securing the largest customer contract in the history of our company 8 months prior to this trip. Over the course of 3 years, Nexora Labs had agreed to pay consultation fees totaling $12 million. During our quarterly meeting, Riley had personally presented me with the Roland Garros ticket package. He had also shook my hand in front of the entire team and referred to me as the future of international business development. Suddenly, he began texting me like a young man who had just ended his relationship with his girlfriend. The individual who was seated next to me in the premium seating section cast a peek in my direction. His serene face and the fact that he was wearing an expensive watch gave the impression that he was accustomed to being in high-profile situations. He was probably 55 years old. When I looked back, I realized that I had seen his face before, but I couldn't instantly place it. "Are there any problems at all?" he inquired in a low voice, his accent being unmistakably British. I took a closer look at him more intently. The feeling of recognition was like a wave of ice. Our most significant rival in the European technology consulting sector is Lunara Ventures, which is led by Gerard Bellamy, who serves as the chief executive officer as well. A conference that took place in Amsterdam 2 years ago was where we had a brief conversation, but I remembered him very clearly. During the greater part of a decade, his organization had been looking for ways to steal our customers away from us. I retucked my phone into my pocket and continued, "Just stay focused on your work." But a feeling in the pit of my stomach told me that this moment was about to become much more momentous than a simple dismissal. Riley Denton had just committed the most significant error of his whole professional career, and he was completely unaware of it at the time. There is no way that the timing could have been any better. All of the European activities of Gravura Group were developed from the ground up by me. There were no clients from other countries, and we had no footprint outside of the Chicago metropolitan region when I first started working here 6 years ago. Riley recruited me especially with the intention of bringing about that transformation, promising me stock holdings and collaboration prospects that never materialized. Despite the fact that my experience was in enterprise software installation, I had a flair for understanding how firms in Europe operating differently from organizations in the United States operating differently. Over the course of 2 years, I was able to acquire knowledge of German and French, as well as travel extensively and cultivate ties with technology executives from 12 different nations. It was clear that the results were conclusive. Within the span of 6 years, I had successfully secured 43 significant clients whose contracts had a total value of $78 million. At the moment, our European segment accounted for 37% of the entire revenue generated by Gravura Group. Riley, on the other hand, had always been concerned about my success. When it came to executive work, he was the kind of person who wanted credit for every triumph while also distancing himself from any losses. 18 months ago, when Nexora Labs initially rejected our proposal, Riley openly blamed my cultural misunderstanding of their requirements for the organization's decision. When I eventually succeeded in regaining their trust by implementing a revised approach, he informed the board that it was his leadership that was the deciding factor. For several months, the warning indicators had been steadily increasing. During senior leadership meetings, Riley ceased including me as a participant. He did not confer with me before making the decision to employ his nephew Trevor Denton to be the Assistant Director of European Relations. Despite the fact that Trevor had no prior experience working abroad and could only communicate in English, he was a member of the family. Approximately 3 weeks ago, I came to the realization that Riley had been handling calls from customers that were supposed to be sent to me. My confrontation with him over it resulted in him stating that he was working to streamline communications and that I should not be concerned about topics that were above my pay grade. Catherine, my wife, had observed the shift in my behavior. that had taken place. I informed her about the incident involving the nephew, and she responded by saying that he is preparing you for something. It is not uncommon for men like that to bring in family members unless they have the intention of evicting someone. My response was to disregard her worries. After a period of 6 years, during which I succeeded in producing money and expanding the European business, I believed that my position was safe. I have ties with customers that would be difficult to replicate in a short amount of time. In order to meet Riley's requirements, I possessed institutional expertise regarding European markets. I had a mistake. My ignorance led me to believe that Trevor had been working in a methodical manner to weaken the ties I had with my clients. Riley was persuaded by him that I was engaging in native behavior and prioritizing the interests of European customers over the profits of the corporation. He made the suggestion that my frequent travel was excessive, and that the most of my responsibilities could be done remotely by someone who was stationed in Chicago for the most part. In order to show appreciation for my accomplishments, I was expected to receive a vacation to Roland Garros. Instead, it appears like Riley was attempting to get me out of the country while they were gathering the necessary paperwork to terminate my employment. On the other hand, Riley had made a significant error in judgment. During the time that I was sitting next to the one person who had the potential to transform his power play into a disastrous business error, he terminated my employment. Taking out my phone once more, I went back and read Riley's texts once more. The second time around, the words came across as much more offensive. Disgusting workers such as yourself do not deserve to be successful. It was a spectacular display of hubris. The match was still being watched by Gerard Bellamy, but I could tell that his focus had begun to drift somewhat in my direction during the match. He was the kind of boss who saw everything, and my response to those text messages had not been subtle enough. He was the president of the company. As time went on, the entire significance of what had just taken place started to sink in. It wasn't only that Riley had dismissed me. I had been embarrassed by him. The time strategy was devised to inflict the greatest possible damage. When I was fired while I was in Paris, I was unable to defend myself. I was unable to gather documentation, and I was unable to speak to clients or colleagues before the news went throughout the office. As I sat there and watched Nadal celebrate his victory, however, I felt a change beginning to take place within me. The initial feelings of shock and hurt were gradually giving way to something that was more composed and laser-focused. On the contrary, Riley had grossly underestimated me. The relationships I have with my customers sprang to mind. Nexora Labs had made it clear that they wanted me to continue to serve as their principal point of contact for the duration of the contract. As recently as 1 month ago, Klaus Weber, who works at Kristen Global, had informed me that he regarded me to be irreplaceable, particularly since she had faith in my ability to oversee the implementation of their systems. Marie Dubois, who worked for Hollowgate Systems, had been advocating for an extension of the contract. There was more to these ties than just commerce. There was a 6-year period of trust, competence, and cultural understanding that led to the formation of these alliances. Riley seems to be under the impression that he could easily inherit them by dismissing me and replacing me with his nephew. The contrary was going to be revealed to him. My eyes returned to Gerard Bellamy for a moment. Over the course of several years, Lunara Ventures had been attempting to enter the American consulting sector. However, they were unable to effectively compete with well-established firms such as Gravora Group because they lacked the client contacts and cultural knowledge necessary to do so. What would happen if in an instant they gained access to both? When the prize ceremony came to an end, the spectators started leaving in large numbers. Then, after standing up and stretching, Gerard turned his gaze directly toward me. I apologize for being so presumptuous, but you look like a man who has just been given some really upsetting information. Please forgive me. I made a choice that would have a profound impact on everything. To be more precise, I stated this while getting up and extending my hand. The most exciting news of my professional life has just come to me. My name is Jacob Harrison, and I used to work at Gravora Group. My hand was shaken and he grinned at me. In my opinion, Gerard Bellamy, Lunara Ventures, and I have a strong suspicion that formerly is on the verge of being quite major. After pulling out my phone, I showed him the messages that Riley had sent. This was the second time that Gerard read them, and his countenance became increasingly intrigued with each word. In conclusion, he stated that the timing of this event is pretty fortuitous. What would you think about continuing this conversation while we are eating supper together? Near the Louvre, I am familiar with a particularly good restaurant. As the game had barely started, Riley was completely unaware that he was going to lose everything he had worked for. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, I had returned to Chicago with a job offer from Lunara Ventures that well surpassed anything I could have imagined receiving. It was made quite obvious by Gerard that he desired for me to assume charge of their new American development. He offered me a 30% boost in my salary as well as equity shares, something Riley had promised but never had delivered. On Monday morning, the sky was cloudy, and the temperature was so low that it made your jacket feel like it was being cut through. I entered the offices of the Gravura Group for what I knew would be the final time I would ever visit them. Meanwhile, Trevor and Patricia Wells, who is the director of our Human Resources Department, were waiting in the conference room with Riley. As I entered, Riley greeted me with a tone that was unnaturally upbeat and said, "Jacob, how was your time in Paris?" As I took a seat opposite him, I responded by saying that it was educational. Patricia handed a packet with termination information across the table. Restitution of business property, standard severance, and non-compete clauses are also included. There is nothing charitable, but there is also nothing criminal. Riley said, "I believe that everything will be in order for you to find. We have made the decision to reorganize the European division. Trevor will be in charge of this operation. Your assistance is no longer required at this time." With a sly grin on his face, Trevor appeared to have just been awarded a prize. He was 26 years old, had a Master of Company Administration degree from a mid-level school, and had absolutely no experience working in international company. Specifically, I inquired about my customers. In the words of Riley, their company's customers. When everything is said and done, Trevor will be in charge of all European ties. Without any hesitation, I signed the necessary documentation. As a result of my obedience, Riley appeared shocked. As far as I am concerned, Jacob, I was anticipating more resistance from you. This is quite invigorating. While I was standing up and shaking his hand, I told him that there was no use in fighting the inevitable. I hope that everything goes well for you in the European market. However, Riley was unaware of the fact that I had spent the entire day on Sunday making phone calls. Not yet to customers, that will take place at a later time. On the other hand, I had gotten in touch with my attorney, gone over my employment contracts, and verified that the non-compete language in my contract only extended to direct rivals in the Chicago metropolitan region. Moonra Ventures had its headquarters in London. In the meantime, Trevor watched from the other side of the office as I cleaned out my desk. He made it a point to sit at the desk that I had previously occupied and loudly talk European strategy with other people who were willing to listen. Despite the fact that the performance was pitiful, I allowed him to have his moment. On Tuesday a.m., the actual devastation started to occur. Klaus Weber, who works with Kristen Global, approached the main office and requested a conversation with me regarding a revision to the contract. After Patricia switched him to Trevor, Trevor spent 15 minutes attempting to shed light on the reason why he was now Klaus's principal contact. When Klaus finished speaking, he quickly dialed my personal mobile phone number. "Please tell me, Jacob, what is going on at your organization? It is clear that this young man is completely unaware of our agreement." I told him that there have been some shifts in the administration of the company. I am unable to share specifics at this time. However, I will get in touch with you very soon. In the same week, 3 additional customers called with similar inquiries. Marie Dubois was distinguished by her forthrightness. "We need to have a conversation about our contract as soon as possible if you are no longer employed by Gravura Group." On Thursday, Riley went into a state of fear. 6 times, he contacted my mobile phone and left voicemails that were increasingly urgent, expressing his frustration with misunderstandings and hasty actions. It would appear that Trevor had been successful in offending 2 customers and entirely sabotaging a conference call with a possible new client. It was on Friday morning when Nexora Labs filed a formal letter requesting the termination of their $12 million contract due to significant changes in account management. This was the moment that the situation reached its breaking point. It was that evening that Riley showed up at my apartment house. "Jacob, you could not be more wrong. Because you are spiteful, you are damaging their relationships." I assured her that I was not destroying anything. "Because I am just unavailable, I am unable to save you from the stupidity of your nephew. Do you have any desires? Is there more money? Is there a more appropriate title? Riley, I request nothing from you at all. Paris is where you've made your decision." Upon his departure, he appeared to be a man who had recently come to the realization that he had committed a grave error. It was, however, too late. Despite the fact that I had just begun, the damage had already been done. To my surprise, Patricia Wells called me first thing on Saturday morning. Her tone suggested that she was worn out. "I have a question for you, Jacob, and I need to talk to you in private. Did you have any prior knowledge of Trevor's employment before it was made public?" "No." "How come?" "Because I have been going through the papers and there are certain things that don't make sense. However, Trevor's first day of work was only 2 weeks ago, despite Riley's determination to backdate his job to 3 months ago. Also, his income is greater than what you were receiving. This material was fresh and new. When I first heard about Trevor's hiring, I thought it was just a case of nepotism, but Patricia was indicating that there was more to it than that." "And what else did you discover?" "The emails of your customers have been intercepted by Riley for the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Despite the fact that he has been telling everyone that you were intending to quit anyhow, he has set up a forwarding rule that copies everything to his account. I was able to see things more clearly. Riley had not fired me on the spur of the moment. During the months that he had been arranging this, he had been methodically eroding my position while simultaneously grooming Trevor to take that place. There was no prize for the trip to Paris. In order to get me out of the country while he finished the transition, it was an easy method to get off the country. Onward, Patricia continued. It goes on and on. Riley has been in discussions with a consulting firm in Berlin on the possibility of making a purchase of our European client list. He informed them that you were untrustworthy and that the organization required trained professionals to manage its interactions with international organizations. That is now clear to me. This was not a simple case of Riley substituting his nephew for me. He had the intention of selling the European division to a German company in order to cash out, while simultaneously taking credit for the business that I had developed myself. For what time is this supposed to take place? 2 weeks ago, the tentative agreement was sealed with a signature. A complete transfer is planned for the following month. This had been played to perfection by Riley. My position should be terminated, Trevor should be appointed as a temporary replacement, and then the entire operation should be sold to the German company for a substantial profit. On the other hand, Riley would appear to be a strategic genius who had successfully monetized the European expansion, while Trevor would most likely receive a bonus and a letter of recommendation. As far as his plan was concerned, there was only one issue. They are the customers. In the ethos of European business, personal relationships and continuity are highly valued. Simply because Riley Denton said that it would be a good idea, Klaus Weber was not going to agree to work with a random German consulting firm. Marie Dubois would have her contract terminated before she would have worked with individuals she had never met before. The pharmaceutical business from Norway that had been in the process of negotiating a new arrangement would withdraw from the negotiations immediately. Riley was able to determine the monetary worth of the client contracts. Nevertheless, he had a fundamental misunderstanding of the factors that contributed to the value of those interpersonal connections in the first place. In London, I made a phone call to Gerard Bellamy. My dear Gerard, I must speed up the schedule we have set. The European activities of Gravura Group are experiencing a phenomenon that is of great importance. What was the nature of the thing? The strategy that Riley had to sell the division to a German company was made clear to me. Gerard was silent for a considerable amount of time. When he finally spoke, he replied, "That is actually perfect for us." The fact that he is considering selling indicates that he has already given up on the idea of managing those relationships on his own. Furthermore, in the event that the customers are dissatisfied with the changeover, they will be looking for other options. Exactly the same. How soon are you able to get started? My arrival in London is possible by Wednesday. How wonderful. Your employment agreement will be drafted by legal professionals. What about Jacob? Indeed, begin compiling a list of all of the client relationships that you are able to move away. It is our intention to transform Riley's master plan into the most significant present that our organization has ever been given. Riley was under the impression that he was playing chess, but in reality, he had just surrendered every piece on the board to his opponent. In the evening of Tuesday, I boarded a flight to London, and I spent the morning of Wednesday in Gerard's office, where I finalized the job agreement. Contrary to my expectations, the terms were more favorable. A considerable financial share, complete authority over customer relationships, and the position of Director of American Operations will be offered. Gerard had completed his assigned tasks. Despite the fact that Lunara Ventures had been attempting to enter the American market for 3 years, they were unable to compete with established companies because they lacked the relationships and cultural expertise necessary to do so. By hiring me, both of the issues were resolved instantly. While we were going over the contract, Gerard remarked that your timing is very remarkable. For several months, we had been working on constructing our American infrastructure, but we required someone who was familiar with both markets. Around Thursday, I started making phone calls. My first point of contact was with Klaus Weber. I informed him that I had officially joined Lunara Ventures and that I would be continuing to provide help for the execution of their technology from London. Klaus said that this is a better option. Within the European market, Lunara Ventures enjoys a stellar reputation. When will we be able to transition the contract? The following week, I will have a member of our legal team get in touch with you. Similarly, Marie Dubois was amenable to the idea. She had been aggravated by Trevor's lack of understanding, and she was glad when she found out that I would continue to manage her account. She stated that at long last, there was someone who comprehended our company. Send the documentation for the transfer to me as soon as possible. Despite their more cautious approach, the Norwegian Pharmaceutical Corporation indicated that they were willing to meet. Riley was under the impression that he was selling the German company a contract worth $12 million. But in reality, the possible contract was still open. Up until Friday, I had confirmed transfer agreements with 6 significant clients, which represented a total of $42 million in contracted revenue at the time. 3 more customers expressed interest in scheduling meetings to discuss the possibility of switching their accounts. There was no way for Riley to know what was going on. During the time that Riley was completing arrangements with the German consulting firm, it appears that Trevor was still attempting to persuade clients that he was capable of meeting their requirements. The trap was set up in an ideal manner. The offices of the Gravura Group were a complete and utter mess on Monday morning. The legal team representing Klaus Weber has dispatched notices of termination for 3 different contracts. A request was made by Marie Dubois for the immediate return of all confidential documents. They were scheduled to meet for negotiations, but the Norwegian pharmaceutical business decided to cancel. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Riley called me. "Why in the heck are you acting like this, Jacob? I currently hold a position with Lunara Ventures. Customers made the decision to follow me. You are unable to accomplish this. A non-compete agreement has been signed by you. I consulted with my attorney about it. London, not Chicago, is where Lunara Ventures has its headquarters. Companies that operate on a global scale are exempt from the non-compete clause." The pause on the other end of the line continued for close to 30 seconds. "You are destroying the division that occurs in Europe." "Not at all, Riley. When you fired me because of a text message, you completely wrecked it. Simply put, I am assisting my customers in locating better service." Tuesday brought with it other notices of termination. By Wednesday, the German consulting firm had already begun to raise major concerns regarding the value of owning a European subsidiary that had no customers. The phone rang once more on Thursday morning from Patricia Wells. This is a total and utter breakdown for Riley. Additionally, Trevor resigned yesterday, and the board is requesting explanations for his departure. The German agreement is coming apart. Which kinds of explanations are that, when we lost 70% of our revenue from Europe in just 1 week? An update was provided by Gerard over the phone on Friday afternoon. The pharmaceutical business from Norway is interested in moving further with partnership with us. Over the course of 3 years, they are offering $15 million. How wonderful. How wonderful. What about Jacob? Someone by the name of Patricia Wells just called me, and it was a very intriguing conversation about something. She expresses her desire to have a conversation with Lunara Ventures about the possibility of employment options. The most talented individuals were leaving Riley's empire before it entirely sank, as it was in the process of disintegrating. A man who had before referred to me as pitiful was about to be confronted with the reality of what it meant to fail. Exactly 3 weeks after Riley had terminated my employment in Paris, the final blow was delivered. This was the news that made everything worthwhile, and Gerard brought me into his office to share it with me. The board of directors of Gravura Group has recently voted Riley out of his position as regional director. It would appear that the contract revenue loss of $87 million was considered a serious enough crime to warrant termination. I experienced a vague sense of contentment, but not joy. As a result of his haughtiness and lack of discernment, Riley had brought trouble upon himself. Further, Gerard said, there is more. It would appear that Trevor Denton is informing people that you sabotaged the European division out of vengeance. There are several of your former co-workers who are inquiring about his account of the events being described. This was something I had anticipated. We needed someone to blame for Riley and Trevor's failure, and I was the apparent target for them to point the finger at. Allow me to speculate, I said. They assert that I stole customers, without their permission. Exactly the same. What they do not know, however, is as follows. The documentation of everything has been done by Patricia Wells. A number of things, including the proposed sale to the German company, backdated employment records, and email forwards. The fact that Riley had been plotting your termination for some months is something that she is ready to testify about. That was the epitome of irony. The meticulous planning that Riley had done had resulted in the creation of a paper trail that demonstrated that his acts were deliberate, rather than impulsive. He might have been able to keep some of his customers if he had simply fired me in an honest manner. His lie, on the other hand, had made my leaving appear to be appropriately justified to all parties involved. What takes place at this moment? Next month, Patricia will begin her new role as European Operations Manager with our company. In addition, the Norwegian pharmaceutical agreement is growing to include their sister company in Oslo, and Klaus Weber is suggesting our services to 2 companies in Munich. He had lost everything because of a text message that Riley had sent from Paris. The company division that he had attempted to steal, his career, and his reputation all came to an end. During this time, Lunara Ventures had established a presence in the American market, which had the potential to generate more than $100 million in sales. The justice had been carried out in a manner that was discreet, expert, and comprehensive. Exactly 6 months later, I was at my London office reviewing quarterly reports when I received a phone call from Catherine, who spoke from Chicago. She stated that you will never guess who she was that she saw at the grocery store the day before. Riley? The grocery that was close to our previous flat was where he was bagging goods. He didn't look good at all. I did not experience any relief as a result of Riley's failure. There is no real peace that can be achieved by destroying someone's career, even if they actually deserve it. On the other hand, I had gained information that was really helpful regarding loyalty, timing, and the significance of treating others with basic respect. Every single anticipation had been surpassed by Lunara Ventures. In addition to opening offices in Boston and Seattle, we had secured 14 large clients in the United States. A collaboration that encompassed 5 countries had developed out of the pharmaceutical contract that had been agreed upon in Norway. Particularly significant was the fact that I had discovered a corporation that prioritized expertise over politics. Rather than viewing me as a challenge to his power, Gerard regarded me as an equal partner. There was no zero-sum competition among us. Rather, our accomplishment was a shared success. When I was in London in the spring, Catherine came to visit me. We began discussing the possibility of having children after purchasing a home in Hampstead. I felt like I was establishing something, permanent for the first time in years, rather than merely surviving someone else's goals. This was a completely new experience for me. In the month of June, the Roland Garros competition made its way back to Paris. Another set of tickets was provided to me by Gerard, but this time I was able to see the event from the corporate hospitality suite that Lunara Ventures had purchased. On that particular day, Rafael Nadal won his 14th French Open title. As he lifted the trophy, I reflected on the significant changes that had occurred in my life over the course of the preceding year. On occasion, the most unfortunate thing that takes place in your life turns out to be the most fortunate thing that could have occurred. The text message that Riley sent me had liberated me, despite the fact that he had no intention of doing. So I never expressed my gratitude to him for it, but perhaps I ought to have.